Hello there, my name is Adam. I'm a 3D artist and illustrator, and today we're going to make an isometric fantasy castle room, rather. Before we start anything, I want you to go over here to Edit, Preferences, then go to Key Mapping, and turn on Tab for Pie menu and Extra Shading Pie menu. Go to Navigation. You can turn on Depth. You leave auto perspective on. Input, emulate 3-button mouse, have that on. Then go to add-ons and do loop, turn on mesh loop tools and extra, and do add mesh extra objects. Alright, after that go here and do save preferences. And also, if you want to see the hotkeys, they're right here. Here, I'll press spacebar just so I know that it shows the hotkey. Let's change this to a shader editor. That way, if we press spacebar, it doesn't initiate the animation. Alright, so the thing we have to do here is import the reference. So if we can just use this cube here. Let's do Shift A, image reference. And let's load in Fantasy Voxel Room 1. Before you do that, alright, do Shift A, image reference, and let's load in Fantasy Voxel Room 1. Turn off Align to View and load reference, then do rotate, x-axis, and then type in 90, G, X, and move it over to here. You can scale it down if you wish to. There you go. And we're going to basically make this. And you can move it behind a little, GY, to about there. Perfect. Now, what we got to do with this, do edit, face selection, select these 3 faces, X, do faces. There you go. Now we have those. Let's add a modifier to it, a solidify modifier. There you go. And let's do 0.09. See how that looks. Make sure to do even thickness. And let's see if that fits. So we're trying to match this back wall and this bottom part here, if anything. And I guess 0.9 is good. If anything, we can modify it later. Don't worry about it. For now, we're going to leave it like that. And we can add another modifier to this. It's a bevel modifier. And let's do 0.01 as the thickness of the bevel. Ooh, I meant to do it. And let's go over here to mount. And let's do 0.01 for the bevel amount. And segments, let's do 3. There we go. That should round it off. If anything, you can make it 2 if you feel like it's a little. And there. Now you have like a little bevel. And this will help when we go into views like this to see the edge of the floor, or views like this from the top where you need to see the wall. Alright. And you can remove it after, but we're going to leave it since it works just fine. Alright. The next thing we gotta do is start adding a few bits of furniture. Also, this wasn't made in like a 3D model or anything. This is made with AI art. It was AI art generated. So we're simply using this as a reference to, make things. You can do the same thing and just copy and do this a repeat of what we're doing today. Okay. So, the first thing I want to do is make this piece of furniture here because I think it just looks interesting with the crystals here. It looks like a notebook, something weird here. It looks like a book. But let's get started with that. And then later on we can start making these little arches and stuff that looks really interesting. I like it, at least. So let's do Shift A. Let's do mesh and let's do a cube. Scale it down. Do G X. And let's start making the top part. Or at least this part here. So, Let's do edit, face selection, select this face, extrude it this way to make another square. Let's just grab both bottom parts, extrude them in the z-axis. Let's just select these bottom parts, extrude in the z-axis, make it pretty thin, extrude it down again to about there, extrude one more time, and I guess I'll do it to about here, extrude one last time, and there you go. Then we're going to make the legs as a separate thing and this little tarp on top of it as a separate thing as well. But for now, we're adding these little pieces to it. So before we continue, let's add a bevel modifier to this. And let's do 0.0 for now. Actually, 0.2. There you go. That way it adds like a little bit of bevel. Go back into edit. Don't apply them, by the way, don't worry. But now, all we have to do is click on this. And right click, extrude faces along normals. And make them go out like this. Only slightly, you don't have to go crazy. And do the same to these. There you go. And right click, extrude along normals. And make it a little bit bigger than the other one. You can always look at the top view to see. But if anything, you'll see it like that. But there, it should bevel them out as well. So it should look just like in the original. The other thing we need to do is do edit. Control R. Let's add one edge about there. Control R on the other side. Add another one here. Do edge selection. And do edge selection on this. And this one. And scale it in. Just a teensy bit. Nothing too crazy. But there. And that should add that little crevice that we get there. And we can add that to the bottom one as well. Though the bottom one doesn't seem to have it that much. Now, let's select these faces here. Do face selection. And we select these. If you really want to just select everything, just do one. X-ray. And just select it like this. You can do Control to deselect these bottom ones. There we go. And turn off X-ray, and you can just right-click, extrude face along normals. And extrude them a little bit. Nothing too crazy, but there. And you can just do Control R one more time. Add one more loop here. Go into X-ray, one, face selection. Select these top faces. Go back into this view after turning off X-ray. Extrude along normals. And make another little like ladder edge there. And it should start looking something like this. Basically a very similar replica to the original right here. And we have our main like table shape. Alright. The one thing I will do, edit selection or edge selection. Let's select this edge. GZ. Make it as flat as you can. But there. And now we need to make this little tarp on it. So, to make the little tarp, let's do Shift A, Mesh, and let's do a plane. There we go. Let's do Edit. Or actually, let's do GZ, move it up first. Put it right about here. Do 7 on the numpad. Scale it down to about there. Perfect. And now, GZ, holding Shift, put it about there, and we're going to add this over the edge. To do that, what we're going to do is edit, Control R, and just add a lot of loops here, like that. And we have to add like a little slit here, and we're going to add that in a bit. Actually, let's just do 7, Control R, and let's just start the slit here. There we go. And now they're even on each side. Or maybe slightly uneven. We can always move them around. Let's do GX. There you go. That's more even. And now we do edit, face selection, select these, and we want it to basically end right there. So I'm going to delete these, X, do faces, and now we select these ones, press O, G, scale it down a little, move to about there, rotate, make sure you're in the 3 view, G again, rotate, and rotate, G a little bit more, until they're straight like that. Perfect. Now it drapes over the edge just like that. And don't worry, we can extrude it a little bit more. Now I do face selection on these, X, faces, and now we do vertice selection, press 1, and let's try to get this shape here, GX. Also make sure to turn off O, GX, because otherwise we're going to get some weird shapes. To about there. And I guess we can scale these in the outwards, and scale these in the x-axis in. But there you go. And this back part is just rounded off. We're just going to do Control B on it. Alright. We just right-click Shade Smooth. You can right-click Shade Smooth some other stuff, but for now we're doing it on this. Edit. And let's add a Solidify modifier to this. And we're going to do 0.09, see how that looks. Yeah, that looks accurate. Perfect. Exactly how I wanted it. Apply. Let's go over here. Go to Normals and Auto Smooth. And that should fix a lot of the visual stuff that was going on there. Edit. Or actually, just go to Modifier and do a Subdivision Surface. And that should round it off quite a bit. And don't apply it. Just put a 2 here. And that should round it off much smoother. And now if you want, you can delete a few faces. For example, this one. Or just go into like X-ray. Select everything here. X. Until this like part here is visible. X faces. Do edge selection, select this edge, F. Actually, no, not like that. Select these 2 edges, F. You can turn off X-ray, just in case. There's that one, and just do the same on this side. There you go, and just add those little edges. And then we get that thickness there. And we can do G, Z, move it up a little bit. And there, we have that little tarp, and it shows that part there. Now, this tarp has a few shapes on top of it as well. It's not just a simple shape, but that's pretty easy to fix. Do Control R, and Control R on this side. That should straighten it out a little bit. Do face selection, and let's just select this middle bit, like this. And right click, extrude face along normals, and do it a little bit to about there, and do Control R, and add another loop here. And it should look something like that. Perfect. Next we gotta make this little crystal thing. That should be pretty simple. Do Shift A, Mesh, and let's do I guess that would work. Shift A, Mesh, Q, scale it down, G, Z, 7, G, put it right there, scale it down, and let's just start making the general shape. Edit, Control R, add 2 loops there, scale them out in the x-axis to about there, 3 for face selection, or actually let's do Control R, add 1 more loop about there. Now do it. Extrude it out to about there. Edge selection. Scale them in the x-axis out there. Do edge selection. And I guess we can do the same here. Let's just do extrude like this a little bit. Select these faces. Do G, Y. Move them in. Now go into edge selection. Select both edges here on both sides. Do Control B. And bevel them out like this. Perfect. Select these. Select this edge here. Do G, Z. Move it down a little. It should look something like that. And we can bevel these even. Let's do Control B. And scale them in the x-axis to about there. And right now the shape should look something like that. Let's make those crystals. Let's do Shift A, Mesh. Let's do a cylinder. Reduce it to 5. It should make a shape like this. Scale it down a lot. G, move it somewhere around there. Press 1, G, and right there. And now let's get the heights. Let's do Edit, X-ray, Face Selection, and just select the top face. Turn off X-ray, and now all we have to do is G, Z, put it up to, I'd say about there. Shift D, put another one right over here. Edit, G, Z, move this one down a little bit. Shift D, one right here. Edit, and this one, GZ, all the way to the top. There you go. G, Y, G, Y, and G, Y. And there we have our 3 little crystal-ish shapes, rather. Edit. Do edge selection. These edges here, do G, Z, move it up like this. Then edit, actually just edit both of these. Edge selection, vertice selection, like that. And then we do O, G, Z, so it affects most of the stuff. And make it all the way up like that. And there we have our main little crystals. You can make them go closer, so let's just do 7 on the numpad. You can maybe scale them up a little. Do G, move them around. Think they don't look good. Scale out. And it looks something like this. Do Control J on these. Select both. GX. Move it to about there. Next, we gotta make this. First, let's make a book. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, and let's do a cylinder. Instead of 25 or any other number, do, let's see, I guess 30? Yeah, 30 seems correct. There we go. Let's do a 30. Scale it down. G, Z. Scale down even more. Scale it in the Z-axis. I think I want my book to be a little bit thicker. Scale it down to Z. Edit. Face selection. Select the top face, bottom face, X. Now do edge selection. Select this edge. Extrude S, M at center. Do the same down here. Extrude S, M at center. And now do X-ray, press 1 on the numpad, and select half of the, obviously in face selection by the way, select half of it like this, then do X and faces, and done. We have the halfway point of the book. Make sure that it's perfectly straight, and yes it is. Let's do edge selection right here. There we go. And do F. Alright. Now all you have to do is extrude this outwards to about here. Let's do Control R and add a loop this way to about that thickness. Do Control R again and add another one here. Control R. And don't worry about this here. like it not having the turnaround here, because I actually want it to look that way. I don't I want this to look like a special book, is the point that I'm getting. Well, that's all for this first part. In the second part, we're going to make a book, and we're going to position it so that it's on top of a few stands that we're going to make. Then we're going to position that piece of furniture, and then we're going to start creating the top part of the little lantern. We're going to make the pipe that's in the middle, then the bottom part, and we're going to add a few objects to it, and that should be everything for the second part. Welcome back! In the second part, we're going to make a book, and we're going to position it so that it's on top of a few stands that we're going to make. Then we're going to position that piece of furniture, and then we're going to start creating the top part of the little lantern. We're going to make the pipe that's in the middle, then the bottom part, and we're going to add a few objects to it, and that should be everything for the second part. Alright, now do Control R on the bottom. It's not crazy. Do Control R here. Now do K, and connect it there. Press Enter. Do K again, enter. Now do face selection, select these faces here, and now right click, extrude face along normals, and extrude them inwards, almost to about there. Make sure to do offset even, and then just do face selection again, select this face, do G, make sure to turn off O, GX, and move this into about there. And there you go, we have our book. Obviously it cuts off straight like that, but it's okay. I want this to be a semi-special book. Alright, next we have to make the little podium. So we have our book that will be floating on this. Let's do 1G, put it like right about there. Or actually it seems to be right on this side. 3, let's rotate it like this. G, and move it to about there. And let's make its little like floating podium thing. Let's do Shift A, mesh, and let's do a cube, scale it down, G, Z, press 3, G, Y, and let's put it like about there. Let's do edit, face selection, G, Y, and now let's do Control R, add a few loops there, edge selection, select these edges here, do G, Z to make it pretty flat, do Control R in the halfway point, like this, Z, Control R, there we go, that's what I wanted. Let's do face selection, select these faces here, let's do Control R one more time, add a one loop here, face selection, and right click, extrude faces along normals, move it down to like there, or just do extrude and do it downwards like this. Since you don't see the bottom part, it's alright. Let me just do face selection on these, do G, Z, and let's select these two faces and extrude these ones outwards, edge selection, GY. There we go. We have our little podium. Scale it in the x-axis to be pretty thin. GX, put it right about there. GZ, make sure it's touching everything. GY. Shift D, constrain it to the x-axis. Put it over here. Select the book, 3, and rotate to the angle that this is at. G. And it doesn't matter if it's not completely connecting, since we're just going to make it kind of floating. Rotate in. Perfect. And now it looks slightly magical. I like it. Alright. And later on we're going to add something on top of this to make it look interesting, but for now, let's leave it as is. Okay. Last thing we got to do is make the legs. Let's do Shift A, mesh, cylinder, scale this down to about there. Do GZ, edit, Control R, add a few loops, face selection, select this edge here, and this one, extrude outwards, or right click, extrude along normals, edit, scale it down, scale it in the Z axis. And that should be pretty much the details for this. Let's just do face selection on this and scale this inwards like this, scale it in the Z axis. And there, we just have our leg there. And it only seems to have 2 legs on the piece of furniture. So we're going to make these pretty big to about there. 7, G, put one about here, Shift D, and one about here. 7, Shift D, constrain it to the X axis, and move. Let's press 1, G, X, and just align them like that. Do Control J on these, and done. That should be the whole piece of furniture all done. Let's just select everything here. Well, first let me select these 2. Do Control J. Make sure everything is grouped correctly. And separate it correctly. Alright. Select everything here. Do 7. Scale it down. Rotate it in the Z axis, 90. G, and put it right about there. Scale it down even more. GZ. And make sure it's touching the floor. And there we go. That looks really interesting. I like it. Okay, the next thing we're working on is this one right here. So we're going to make this little piece of furniture here. To do that, first, we're going to do Shift A, Mesh, and we're doing a cube. There we go. Let's scale it down. And we're going to make this top part first. So from what I can see, let's do Edit, do Control R, and let's add a loop right about here. Later on, we're going to shrink that bottom part. Control R, add another loop here. Remember, we can like change the shape and do whatever we want with it later. But for now, we're just going to edit them like this. Just add a few loop cuts there. We're going to leave a pretty big one right here. Control R. Let's add a few right here to the end. And then we're just going to extrude upwards and edit the rest. But for now, we're just adding the base shape of it. Let's just do Control R like this. Add a loop right about there. Control R. Another one here. And do the same on this side. Perfect. Now we do face selection. Or rather, let's do edge selection. Select these edges here. Just double click them. And now we just scale them in. Make sure to select all the edges right here. Of course, we can also do face selection, but if we do edge selection, it's more simple. Okay, let's just scale this in to about there. Let's do face selection. Alright, let's select these faces here. And extrude faces along normals and extrude them outwards. To about there. Let's select these ones. Extrude faces along normals. Let's add like a little ladder effect. We can select the top face. So let's just do 7. And select these faces here. Do GZ to move them upwards. Edge selection. GZ. Move it to like about there. Face selection. So let's select these faces here. Don't forget about the back one. There we go. Right click, extrude faces along normals. And make sure they don't intersect with each other. But there you go. And now, let's add that little like ladder shape there. First, what I want to do is do edge selection. Select these edges here. Well, only these edges though. Not the bottom ones. Make sure all the edges are selected. Do Control B. You can bevel them in. Almost like that. Face selection. Let me select this. Right click. And extrude faces along normals. And extrude them outwards to about there. Let's select these top faces here and just extrude upwards. One like there. Let's select the middle one and just do GZ. Move it upwards, that way it's a little diagonal. And there we go, we get the top of this. And there's like some weird shapes going on, but I don't really mind those. I'm not going to add them. Though it does seem to be part of it. Nah, I'm not going to add them. I'm just going to add the objects on top of this in a bit. For now, what we got to do is extrude these a little more outwards. So let me just select these edges here. And I guess we can just scale them up to about there. So we can add a few objects that, are on top of it. There we go. And I mean, that's the general shape. I don't think we need to do any other changes to this. Yeah, that looks good. If anything, I think we should just scale the edges of this. So scale that up. GZ. There we go. Face selection. GZ. There you go. That way we get like a little visual of it from there, but it's not going to be visible that much at least. Next we can make the little pole. So let's do Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder. Let's scale it down to about let's do GZ. Scale it down even more until we get a shape that I like. And I like that shape. Let's just do Edit, Face Selection, select this face. And we're going to get the height of this. So let's put it at an angle. GZ. And it seems to go down to about there. Next, let's do Control R. Let's add a loop here. Another one here. A thin one here. Another thin one. Let's add a long shaft. Control R. And we add one more here. Okay. Face selection. Double click all of these. And I guess we can just scale them down. Let's actually add one more loop here in that case. Just one more. Very close. But there. Face selection. Do the same thing again. We actually need to add one more. I guess we can do it that way. Alright. Yeah, let's do it that way. Let's just scale this down even more to be pretty thin. Let's just try to get the thickness of the main tube. Should be right about there. GZ. Make sure it's touching. Edit. Face selection. Select these. Right click. Extrude faces along. Yeah, extrude faces along normals. Make it pretty big. Do the same here. Really big one there. Do edge selection. GZ. Move this down. GZ. Move this down till it's like about there. Let's just select these faces. Right click, extrude faces along normals. And make it pretty thick. And there you go. We get our little pole that's holding it up. And if anything, we can always just scale it in the Z-axis. Just like this. And done. It can be a little longer. Next, we need to add this base to it. So for the base shape, seems to be pretty odd. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder, and put a 5 here. Or let's put a 6 actually. There we go. That way it's a hexagon. Though it doesn't seem to be a hexagon. Let's do 7. See how that looks. There we go. That looks accurate. Let's just scale this down to the size. GZ to about there. Control. Let's actually do edit. Control R. And let's add a top face here. We're going to move this out. Or rather, we're going to move this top bit in. Let's do that right now. Let's scale that in to about there. Let's do I and set it a little bit. GZ. And let's just extrude it upwards. There we go. Perfect. Next, we have to Control R again. Add an edge there. GZ. Get pretty thin. Face selection. Select these front faces here. Right click, extrude faces along normals. And just extrude these out a little bit. And do edge selection on these. Oops. Let's Control Z that. Deselect that. Yeah, there's no back one. Okay. Right click, extrude face along normals to about there. Now we do edge selection. Let me select this edge here and these edges here and scale them up. Make them go outwards. Select this edge, GZ. Make them go there. And we can just add the legs in almost like this. So let's do face selection on these. As for the back ones, I don't think we need them. And we just extrude downwards in the Z-axis. There we go. So there we have the legs. And let's do face selection, select these. Press I and set them like this. Right click, extrude faces along normals, and make them go in a little bit. Do edge selection, GZ. There you go. Let's add a few details to this. For example, face selection, these go in a little bit. So let's just scale them in to about there. And I guess that should be all the detail we need to add to this. The legs do seem to match pretty much almost exactly. But let's just keep adding a few more little things to this. Like for example, to the legs here. Let's do Control R. Make sure to scroll up a bit. There we go. And we add that to everything. There we go. It needs 3 loops. And now we do face selection. Select these faces like this. Press 3. G. Move it out like that. Or no, rather, let's do face selection. And just extrude them individually. So let me just extrude this one outwards like this. One by one. And do the same to the other legs. Then we just do edge selection. Actually, we'll do that later. Let's do just face selection. 7. I guess that won't help. Alright, let's just extrude it out a little bit. And just try to copy the other side. Doesn't need to be exact, but it just needs to look similar. There you go. Face edge selection. Select these edges here on the little stairway, except for that last one. There we go. Control B. And let's add a few loops there. Or a few, yeah, just a few more like edges. And there you go. Just curve them in like that. You can do the same to these ones. Control B. And done. And it should look something like that. And these are more like triangles, so let's just do that. Let's do vertice selection. Select these. Scale them in. Like that. Let me select these. And the back can stay like that, but mainly the shape that I wanted was this. And that looks just like the original. And we're done. That should be the base of this like lamp looking thing. We can scale it and change it however we want. For example, we can make it a little smaller, scale it in the Z-axis to be a little thinner. Make sure it's touching. But now let's select all of the parts. Or actually, before we do that, we need to add all these little like things to it. Do Shift A, Mesh. Let's do a cylinder one more time. Reduce it to, or no, let's not do a cylinder. Let's do Shift A, Mesh. Let's do a cube. Add a modifier, bevel modifier. And we increase this to a 3. There we go. And before we apply it, let's scale it down. Scale it in the Z-axis to about here. Scale it down even more. GY. 3, G, scale it in the Z-axis, GZ, there we go. Scale it in the X-axis, GX, and let's put it like right around there. And there we go. We have that little shape that looks a little odd right there. And we can rotate it slightly, so let's just rotate it in the Z-axis to be like at this angle. And now we need to add all the other objects, but that should be pretty simple. Just Shift-A, Mesh, Cube, scale it down, scale it in the Z-axis, scale it down even more. Well, that's all for the second part. In the third part, we're going to continue adding a few little objects to the lantern-looking thing. Then, we're going to start working on the pieces of furniture that are below the shelves. We're going to make a pillar so that we're able to position all of these little pieces of furniture. We're going to start making the bricks that go on top of it, and then we're going to put the other bricks behind it. Welcome back! In this third part, we're going to continue adding a few little objects to the lantern-looking thing. Then, we're going to start working on the pieces of furniture that are below the shelves. We're going to make a pillar so that we're able to position all of these little pieces of furniture. We're going to start making the bricks that go on top of it, and then we're going to put the other bricks behind it. 3, G, put it right about here, holding Shift, GY, there we go, we can scale it down, GY, and GX, Shift D, X, Shift D, X, scale it in the Z-axis, GZ, edit, face selection, GZ, edge selection, Control B, bevel it down like that, face selection, extrude faces along normals to about there. And there we get like a weird shape that's right there. It just adds a few more details to this. Shift D, X, scale it in the Z-axis, GZ, scale it down, GX, rotate in the Z-axis to be about there. Edit, Control B, there you go. Scale in the X-axis, face selection, or rather go edit, face selection, I, inset it a little bit, extrude inwards, and there you go. And I think we're done. Let's just select all these, do Control J, and now we can select everything and just put it into place. Let me deselect that, scale this down, 7, G, put it right about there, GZ, holding Shift, and scale it to size. So let's just scale it up, GZ, and it's a pretty big shape, so we should just put it somewhere like there, GZ, there we go, GX, GY, 7, G, or rather select everything, deselect this, 7, G, holding Shift, and put it right in the corner, but there. And there we have that little piece of furniture there. Next, let's make these things here. That should also be pretty simple. Let's do Shift-A, Mesh. Let's do a cube. There we go. Scale that down. And let's start adding all these little details. Edit, Control R. And we're going to make this little thing here. Control R to add a little loop here. Control R, add another one. Control R one more time, but this time in the middle. Add a little loop there. Control R, add a loop here, and done. Let's do face selection. Let's just select all of these, extrude them outwards a little bit. Do edge selection, select these. Do GY to move them out. And there you go. And let's just select these faces here and extrude them inwards. Just like that. Do edge selection on these. Do Control B to bevel them. Add a few more loops there. And it should look something like that. Let's do face selection on these. And Let's just add one more loop right about here. Face selection, select these. Extrude faces along normals. Extrude them inwards. Edge selection, select these edges. Control B, holding Shift, add a bevel. Edit, face selection, select these, and extrude them outwards. And there you go. We have that little piece of furniture that goes there. Of course, there's something on top of it, but we're just going to leave it like that. And there's also a very strong light source coming from this. So we're just going to add like a little gap and add a lantern. So it seems to be basically the same shape right here, only it's flat. So let's just do G and move this out of the place. Do Shift A, Mesh, Cube. Let's move this over to here. Scale this down. And now let's make this here. Edit. Do face selection. Select this. Press I. And let's move it in like that. And do it again. Make it a little thicker. To about there. Extrude it inwards. Just a teensy bit. Do Control R. Right down the middle. Control R. Right down the center. One more time. And Control R one more time on face selection. Select these. Extrude them inwards. Do Control R one more time. Right about there. Do edge selection. Select edges here. Do Control B. There you go. Face selection. And extrude this inwards. And let's make a little lantern. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder, and we're just going to reuse this shape here. Edit, Control R. We're just going to add a loop here, another one here, make it pretty thick, and the top can stay as is. So let's just do face selection, select these faces here, right click, extrude face along normals, make them go outwards, edge selection, scale this in a little bit, like that. Control R. Just add a loop down here. Select this one, scale it in like this. Select both and scale them in like this. And do Control B to bevel those. And it should look something like that. Scale it down. 3. G. Put it right about there. GX. Scale it in the Z-axis. GZ. And scale it up in general. GZ. Move it to about there. GX. Scale it a little bit more. And it's okay if it pops out a little bit. It just needs to be there. And I'm guessing that's pretty much it. It's like a little shelf with a light in it. So let's just select all this. And now do G and put it like right next to this. Now let's do the other stuff that's on top of it. For example, these shelves. But for that, we are going to need the measurements of the walls here. So let's do these bricks right here. Do Shift A, Mesh, and let's start making these walls with a cube. Scale it in. Let's add a bevel modifier to this. Do 0.02. They seem to be more rounded off than that. Let's do 0.4. 6. Perfect. And let's put a 3 here. So that's in 3 segments. That seems to be rounded off enough. Let's put them into place. So, the first one that we're going to do is this wall right here. Or rather, let's do this one first, and then we're going to do this one. So, let's do 7, G, put it into place right about there. GZ, holding Shift, edit. Let's do face selection, select this, do GZ, move it up to about there, extrude, just a teensy bit, extrude once more, or rather Control Z, extrude, scale it in, extrude, scale it out. Now we just do edge selection, do GZ, like about there, edge selection on this, GZ, and make it pretty thin. There we go. And we get that little like edge cut there that I like. Face selection, and let's just keep extruding it upwards. Actually, before we do that, let's do GX, move this a little closer since we need the reference. Edit. Now we just extrude this upwards to about here. We do the same thing again. Extrude up a little bit, scale it in, extrude up a little bit, scale it out. Now we extrude up, do GC to adjust, do it again, extrude up a little bit, scale it in, extrude up again, scale out. Extrude one more like long square here, and do it one more time, and extrude up to there. And when it comes to this shape here, we're going to make a custom one. So, to do that, we're just going to, let's just press I on this, make it go inwards like that, to about here, extrude it up, do about the roof height, should be about there. Let's do Control R, scroll up to add a few segments. Let's do edge selection, and select these edges like this on both sides, and scale in the x-axis. So the first one's like this. Let's just select them all like this. Make sure you select the top one later on, but for now we're just going to select these. Scale in the x-axis. You can always modify them later. Scale them in the x-axis. And you get what I'm doing. There we go. And once you got it to a point like this, you can just select these two edges here, press O, and scale, scroll up, and it'll affect this part only. There we go. Select these edges here, scale them in, and let's just select it like this. Let's just do X-ray 1, select this part here. Let's press O and scale it up like this, or scale it down rather. Let me select this part, scale it down, and let's just keep doing that until it looks okay. There you go. That's perfect. And it doesn't matter if it's a little bit jank because the original is a little bit weird as well. Let's do edit, face selection. Let me select these faces here. And do GY, extrude them outwards like that. Actually, let's just do X-ray and select all of the little faces here. Turn off X-ray, scale in the Y-axis, and make it pretty thick. Perfect. And I guess make it flat. Let's just do 3 edits. Vertice selection, X-ray. Let me just select all of these. Do S, Y, and then do 0. Do the same on this side. S, Y, 0. And then just do GY. Move it to like about there. There we go. Now it should be all flat. It was looking kind of weird before, so changing it up like that actually works quite a bit. And I guess we can just bevel it a little bit. So let's do edge selection. Let me just select this edge here. Do the same to this edge. And the back edge we don't need to do much, but just these. Do Control B. And let's just bevel them slightly to about there. Just so they're not like a complete edge. It's just a bit too sharp otherwise. And now we can start adding those little bricks. If anything, before we like end it off, edit, vertice selection. And we can just right click shade smooth, fix the normals here, and done. Now we can start adding the bricks. Let's just do Shift A, mesh. Let's do a cube, scale it down. Let's add a modifier, bevel modifier, and do 0.06 on the bevel, and add 3 segments to it. Scale it down. Let's press 1, G, and let's just start adding these bricks in. So for the first brick, scale it in the Z-axis, because it is a little bit flat, G, Z, scale it in the X-axis, X, put it right about there. Let's just select this, select these top ones, make sure you're in X-ray, otherwise you won't select the back ones. O, G, Z, make it go down a little bit to about there, turn off X-ray, G, Z, and move this to about here. Scale it in the X-axis to be a little smaller, scale in the Z-axis, G, Z, put it there. Shift D, X, scale it in the X-axis to be a little smaller like this, GX, and put it right next to this brick. And you get the idea. We're just going to imitate this side of the bricks here, put the ones on top, and afterwards we're going to make these bricks here, and then we're going to make this wall here. We're going to add these as well, and that should be pretty much the bricks just placed. So let's just try to follow along. I'm going to speed it up, and later on we're going to adjust them to look good. Okay, there we go. We added most of the bricks. We still need to modify them slightly because they're not exactly like in the reference. For example, when it comes to these ones, let me select these, edit, and let's just select this front face, do G, X, move them out a little bit, and let's do the same here. Select these, edit, face selection, faces here, GY, and make them go out quite a bit. And now we can just select this, edit, face selection, or rather edge selection. Nah, let's do vertice instead. Select these vertices here, do G, Z, move it down to about there. And now we can add those other bricks to the back. So these ones. Let's just do selection like this, Shift D, constrain it to the X-axis, and move it to about there. Scale it in the X-axis to be pretty thin, to about there, GX. And now it's just positioning them. So putting one like right about, and not there, but like here, to where it's slightly popping out. And we can just position these bricks like this. Let's just press 3 on the numpad, Shift D, and just put another one behind here. Let's just scale it in the Y-axis, a little bit thin, GY, select both, GY, because this one is supposed to be about there. Shift D on this, Y, and scale it in the Y-axis to about there. You can scale it in the Y-axis a little bit more, Y, there you go. Scale in the Y. Let me do Shift D, and put another brick right about here. GY, Shift D, higher like this, Shift D, put another one higher than that one, about there, and Shift D, put one more like GY, do the full extent of it, GY, Full extent, do edit, X-ray, select these vertices, GY, put them all the way to the back, turn off X-ray, and it should look something like that. We can also adjust them. So let's just do GX, move it out like this, GX, this one in, GX, move this one, and there you go. Edit, X-ray, Y, make them intersect, GX, make it go in, G, make it go up a little bit, GZ, just a teensy bit, scale it in the Y-axis, GX, scale it in the Y-axis, there you go. And there, that just adds that little bit of texturing and difference to the bricks there. Alright, that's all for the third part. In the fourth part, we're going to continue adding the back part of the wall to the other wall. We're going to add another pillar, and then we're going to start making the shelves. After that, we're going to add another little piece of furniture on top of the shelves, and that should be everything for the fourth part. We'll come back in this fourth part. We're going to continue adding the back part of the wall to the other wall. We're going to add another pillar, and then we're going to start making the shelves. After that, we're going to add another little piece of furniture on top of the shelves, and that should be everything for the fourth part. Let's just go off of like the script or whatever. Let's do G and do Shift D, scale it in the X-axis. Let's do GY, GX, put it right on the edge there, and it should look something like that. D, Z, let's do Shift D, Z, this one down, scale it in the Z-axis, Z, perfect. And now we get that little edge bit there, and we have to do the same on the other side, but I'm just going to simplify it and just do this, Shift D, rotate it in the Z-axis 90 to about there, and we can adjust it however, but for now we're just going to do it like that. Let's do 7 G and put it right here. Let's just adjust these, do G, Y, G, Y, G, Y. Select all these, G, Y. And that last one is okay. Select all of them again, except for the background thing. G, Z, move it down about there. And now we have to adjust the heights. So this one is supposed to match with this one, so let's just G, Z. Move these up a little bit. And I guess it has to be higher. So let's just move these a little bit more up. GZ. Scale them in the Z axis. There you go. That way we can just select this and just do GZ and move them up to like about there. GZ. There we go. And GZ. And it should look something like that. And now we can do Shift D, constrain it to the X-axis, put it right about here, edit, let's press 1, X-ray, let me just select all of these, do X, vertices, select these, X vertices, turn off X-ray, face selection, select this, and do F. Now I'm going to do extrude, teensy bit, scale it in, extrude upwards a little bit, scale it out, and now just extrude upwards, and do the same again, and extrude upwards, till it meets this here. And there we have that pillar. And now we can just do Shift D, Y, GX, and put it like right there. That way it's like 2 pillars. Though to be fair, GX, it's the same, only it's slightly different. There you go. That looks good. And it seems to be the same thickness. And I guess there, we have our shapes that we're going to need. We have the size that's accurate. So, let me just select this. Press 1, G, scale it down. And let's try to match the reference. Let's scale it in the X-axis to make it pretty thin. to about there. G, put it in place with a little gap. Let's select both of these. G, scale it down. And this one seems to be more of a square, and it also seems to be bigger than the original. Just scale it up and put it there. And there seems to be a pretty substantial gap here, so there's no need to add anything there. G, X, and there doesn't seem to be much gap in between these two. Alright, let's position them correctly. G, Y, make sure it's not going through the wall. G, Y, and there you go, they're positioned in place. And now all we have to do is add all these like little shelf looking things. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, or actually we can just reuse these. Let's do Shift D, Z, scale it in the Z axis. So like about there. G, G, X, put it right about there. G, Z. And I guess that's the correct size. If anything, we can scale it in the x-axis to about there. G, X, to be on the halfway. Shift D, Z, add another little piece on top. Scale it in the z-axis to be thinner. G, Z. And now we do Edit, R, add a loop cut there. Face selection, select this face. And extrude it upwards a little bit to about there. Do Control R one more time. Let's add a loop there and there. Face selection, select these, and extrude them upwards to about there. There we go. Shift D, Edit, G, Z, press 1, G, put it right about here. G, Y, move it to the front a little bit, and Edit, X-ray, vertices selection, select this, G, X, put it right about there. Let me select these vertices here, X, vertices, edge selection, select this, and F to add a face, turn off X-ray, look at this, and if anything, face selection, move this down, and then below it there's like another little cube. Let's do Shift D, X, scale it in the x-axis, GX, put it right there. Shift D, X, scale it in the x-axis, GX, Shift D, Z, GX, scale in the x-axis, about there. Edit. Actually, let's do edit on both. Control R. Add an edge loop here. Control R. Add an edge loop there. Let's do face selection. Select this face here and this one. Extrude faces along normals and make them go outwards. There we go. Should look something like that. And now let's just do Shift A, Mesh, and let's do diamonds, and let's do a gem. Scale it down, scale it in the x-axis to be about that shape there, scale it in the y-axis, rotate, there we go, 7G, put it right about there, scale it down even more, let's press 1G, put it right about here, scale it down more, holding Shift, and I guess we can just leave it there. But there, it's like a little shelf that we can just add there. And there just seems to be a few books here. Potion and something else. It's kind of blurry in all honesty. But that should be pretty easy to add. Let's just do Shift D, X, and put a little shelf here. Do G, Z, move it down a little bit, and there. Alright. Next we have to add like another shape here that rounds off inwards. Let's do Shift D. Well, first let's deselect everything. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, Cube, scale it down. Actually, don't scale it down too much. G, Move it to about here. Edit. Control R. Let's add a loop here. Or actually, to make our job easier, let's do face selection. Select this. GZ. Make it to about there. Extrude. Holding shift. Scale it down. Extrude again. Scale it up. Extrude all the way to the top. Control R. Add one here. Control R. Again. Add another one. Control R. Add one about there. Control R one more time. Let's do face selection. Select this. Extrude it inwards. Edge selection. Select this. And do Control B. There you go. Control Z. We did one small error. Control R. One more time. And we have to add an edge here. Okay, now we do face selection. Extrude those inwards. Edge selection. Let's select of these edges. Do Control B to bevel. There you go. It should look something like that. Edit. Face selection. Let me select these. X. Faces. Edge selection. Double click this. F. Let's extrude slightly. Scale it in. Extrude up again. Scale it out. Extrude. Then after you reach this part, just extrude upwards to like about here. Then just do edge selection. Select this edge here. Do Control B. And bevel it down like this. Add like more loops and done. That's basically all you had to do. Edge. GX. Actually, let's leave it as is. And I think that looks good. Face selection. Extrude this one upwards. About there. Extrude upwards. And I guess we're going to take a few creative liberties. Control Z that. Let me do K. And connect these. Press enter. There we go. Now it's separated. And now we can extrude this up to about there. Extrude up a little to there. Face selection. Let's do GY. And edge selection GY. And it should look something like that. Let's just scale it down. Press 1. Scale it up again. G. And put it right about GY. Scale it in the Y-axis. And from the top it should look something like that. Of course, we can just do edit, face selection, extrude one more time, edge selection, G, Y, select these, Control B, bevel them a little bit more. Perfect. And we can get it into like an angle like that. But in general, we get the same shape. Alright, let's add these other ones, like these. Okay, let's start making this. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, Shift A, Mesh. Let's do a cube, scale it down, G, and let's start adding the details to this. Let's do Edit, Control R, and let's just put it like right there. Control R, separate it here, Control R, add one here, holding Shift, Control R one more time on this side to about there, Control R, holding Shift, Control R, and then we do Control R on here and add a small gap here. Then do edge selection, select these edges here, G, Y, and just move them in like that. And make sure you add another little thing here. Do Control R, add one more loop. Now do edge selection. Make sure you do it here as well, because it is also going to do it there. GY, and just move it in like that. Y. Make sure the gaps aren't too big, but they're there. And now we just do edge selection on this. GY, and move it out like that. Perfect. And we basically get that shape, which is nice. We just get the shape entirely. Let's just leave it like that. And that should be it. I don't think we need to add anything else. If anything, you can do face selection, select these faces here, extrude outwards a little bit, and that's it. Now let's do Shift A, Mesh, Cube, scale it down, G, scale it down again. Let's put it on top of this. 1, G, scale it down a lot, scale it in the Z-axis, and put it like right there. Edit, G, X, Y, to like about there. Edit, face selection, G, Y, to about there. Control R, that loop there, face selection, G, X, actually extrude, outwards like that. Edge selection, this edge and this edge, Control B, scroll up, just to round it off a little bit. And we need to add this shape here and just continue it on to this shape over here. But for now, let's leave it like that. Let's do Control R. Let's do Shift A one more time. Let's add one more cube. Scale that down. And let's give it the same shit that we have here. Except now we're going to cut little slices into it. So, let's do 1, G, put it right about here. Scale it up to about the same size. GX. There you go. And now we do edit, Control R, and let's add another edge there. Let's do edge selection, select this, GY. There we go. And now we do 1K, and we start adding the shapes. So we do one shape like this, somewhat straight. Enter, K again, enter, and just one more time, K, just to separate it here. Let's look at the reference. Okay, so one more time, right about here, enter. And let's add the cuts for this. Okay, one more time, and just press enter on that. Now do face selection, select these faces here, and just extrude them inwards. Let's do face selection, select faces here, X, and do faces. There we go. This one as well. Edge selection, like this edge here, F, and just keep adding faces until everything is covered. Perfect. And there we get like a weird like R shape type deal. I don't really know what it is, but hey, it's just, it looks like that. And now that we have this, we can do Shift D on this. Or actually, no, let's not do Shift D on that. Let's just make a new one. And I guess we can just grab one of these. Let's do Shift D, GY, GZ. And let me add a bevel modifier to these two. But I'll do that whenever I join them. Scale this in the Z-axis to about here, GZ. Here there's a little gap. Scale this in the X-axis, X. Perfect. Edit. Let me just select this and do GY, or GZ wrap. Perfect. Alright, let's just position these. Do Control J on this, Control J on that. And let's just do G, move this out of the way. Scale this, press 1, G, and put it like right about here. And make it so it matches with that. Scale this down, just until there's like a smallest of gaps there. You can scale it up. There we go. And if you want, you can scooch a lot of this stuff over. Just like select everything here, including this. GX, scooch it over a little bit, select these, GX, it's just so it's, you know, not doing so much contact with the wall. GX, GX, perfect. Select this, GY, have it just start there, GY. Let me just select these and do Control J, modifier, bevel modifier and do 0.02. 6. There we go. And that should bevel it out quite a bit. You can add it to these other ones as well, but that should be that for that one. And now to make this simpler shape, let's just do Shift A, Mesh, Cube, scale it down, scale it in the Y-axis, or the Z-axis, I mean. Control R, add a few here, edge selection, GY, move it in, GY, do it like that, edit, edge selection, GZ. Well, that's all for this fourth part. In the fifth part, we're going to start working on a lot of the details of the floor, basically adding all of the floor tiles. Then we're going to start work on a tree that we're going to add on the side. And then we're going to add a floating crystal lantern and a few bushes. And then we're going to add a few bottles to the shelves and other objects. Welcome back. In this fifth part, we're going to start working on a lot of the details of the floor, basically adding all of the floor tiles. Then we're going to start work on a tree that we're going to add on the side, and then we're going to add a floating crystal lantern and a few bushes, and then we're going to add a few bottles to the shelves and other objects there, and make it at an angle like this. Scale this down, 1, G, scale it down, scale it in the Z-axis, G, and put it right on top of this, just like that, G, Y, and put it like right there. UI. Sure, it's right at the front. Perfect. And it should look something like that. Alright, let's do GX to move this over to here. And I guess you can just do Shift D, constrain it to the X-axis, GY, put it like right over here in the wall. Perfect. We're also going to have to add details to the floor. So we're just going to copy these bricks here and put them on the floor as well. I guess we can start doing that right now. So let's just do Shift D, rotate this in the X-axis 90, do it again so that it's facing this way. Press 1, and it should look something like this. And I guess let's just start adding the floor in. So let's just grab one of these, Shift D, scale it down, G, and just add like 3 bricks here. Shift D, scale this in the Y-axis, Shift D, scale this in the Y-axis, a rectangle, just like this. A lot of these are just going to be gray, so there's no need to worry. But, Shift D, a few of these are just going to be red. Try to copy the pattern as best as you can, because that way it looks good. Shift D, scale in the Y-axis, and just try to copy the floor. I'll be right back when I'm done adding all the little floor tiles, and I'll just get back to explaining a lot of the stuff. So now we just have to put this all down, so just move it down. But first, let's do 7. Let's just select all of this. Actually, let's just select the ones we need to select. So let me just go in like this. And every single one that needs to be the color gray, I'll just group together. Example, these ones. These ones actually need to be red. Select this. That one's red. Those are gray. All of these are gray. This red one's not. All of these. And Control J. Actually, select one. Control J. There we go. GZ. And make it so they slightly pop out. Just like that. 7. Actually, let me just hide these. That way I can select these more easily. Deselect this. Select one. Control J. And all of these are just color red. Do Alt H. GZ. And let's just put it like right about, make it so it's barely popping out like that. And there we go. We have our floor tiles. These ones can just remain like that a little. And just select this. Face selection, select these. Control L, G, Z. Perfect. Let's just hide this. And there, we have our little like brick floor. It adds that small bit of detail that I like. But now let's make this tree here. So to make the tree, let's do Shift A, Mesh, add a cube, scale that down. And let's just try to get the general shape. Scale it in the Z-axis, like this. Edit, Control R, add a loop right about here. Let me do edge selection on this. Do Control B to bevel these in like this. And let's make sure to separate it though. Let me do Control R one more time. About there. Face selection, select these. Scale this down. GZ, down even more. And do Control R, scroll up. Add a few of those. Control R, put one little separation here. Edit, edge selection. So, I guess I'll just select it manually, like this. GY, move it in. Control R, add one more loop here. Select these side ones. There you go. Let's do edge selection. You select this, press O, G, scroll down till we get something like this. And let's just start making little tree shapes. Let's do face selection, GZ, do it down like that. Edge selection, this edge is here. Control B, scroll up, and just add it there. That we have those. Edit, edge selection on this. And last but not least, this one. Do Control B, scroll down. We add like 2. And there you go. We get like the little stem for the plant. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, let's do a cube, scale it down, scale it in the Z-axis, scale it down, press 1, G, scale this down, scale it in the Z-axis, edit, Control R, add quite a few, edge selection, Control B, O, face selection, make it pretty big, rotate, and now in this view, rotate it like this, scale it in the Z-axis, put it like right there, Shift D, rotate it like that, scale it down, put it right there. And there we have the 2 branches. GY. Okay, and now we can start adding the leaves. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, Cube, scale it down, Control R, or Edit, Control R, add a separation down the middle like that. One more time. And let's do face selection. Select this face, GZ, make sure to do O, GZ, and we can start making this little bush here. Edge selection, GZ, cut like that, or rather vertice, down like that. Edge selection, Control B to bevel, reduce, looking good. Control B, bevel this one here, and we can do Shift D on this, GZ, make sure it's connecting. Rotate this in the Z-axis. Let's do Edit, Control R. Add one more loop there. Face selection, select this. G, Z, move it down a little bit. K, split it right here. Enter, GZ, just to change it. GY, to move it in. Control R. Face selection, rotate in the Z-axis. GY, and scale it down right about there. Y, rotate in the Z-axis, edit, Control R, add a loop there, face selection, extrude outwards like this, edge, G, there we go. Shift D, select this, Shift D, Shift D, scale it in the Z-axis, like this, edit, face selection. Let's just select these faces here and extrude them up. Let's select these edges here and Control B. Bevel them in like this. Edge selection, GY. Select this edge, GZ. Control R. Actually, let's just do K. Add a split. Enter. Face selection. Select these. And do G. Move it up. K again. Another one here. Enter. Edge. GZ. GZ. And GY. Put this on top. Scale this in the X-axis. And scale this in the Y. Perfect. Let's select all of this. Scale it in the Z-axis. Make it taller. G. Edit. G. Make it go in like that. Scale this in the X-axis. GX. And there we have our plant. Let's do Control J on this. Control J on this. Select both. Rotate in the Z-axis 90. 7. G. Put it right about here. GZ. And it seems to be the correct size, so we don't need to modify it. GY. To about there. GX. And make sure it's not in the wall. Perfect. Of course, we can scale it a little bit more if we really wanted to. Let's just scale it in the Z-axis a little bit more. GZ. And now it's time to add this other plant here. And we also have to add all these little shapes. And to do those little shapes there, I'm just going to do Shift D on this. Scale this in the Z-axis. Let's press 7. Scale it in the X-axis. G, Shift D, rotate, scale it in the Z. Rotate in the Z-axis 90. And there you go. You have the little like objects that are just there. Control J. Just repeat the same object. And right here we have like a little mushroom popping out. We're gonna add that in a sec, but for now let's make this. Shift A, mesh, and let's use a cube for this. Scale it down. And let's just start making a general shape of what it is. So, scale it down, edit, Control R, multiple of these, Control R, and add multiple of these. And let's just start moving these edges around. Edge selection, select this edge here, GY, and just start moving it around. GX, and let me select these last edges, GX, just like this. And let's do face selection, select this, extrude in the Y-axis, GX, extrude again, extrude, GX, GY, let me select these, and extrude them this way, GX, and there you go. And it's mostly flat on the top, but I'm just going to move GZ up like that. And I'm going to right-click Shape Smooth. Fix the normals. And scale this in the Z-axis. Shift D, G, Z. Scale it in the Z-axis. Rotate it in the Z-axis, 90. Scale it in the Y-axis. GX, GZ, GY. Move it in, G, put it right about there, and scale it in the Z, GZ, and this top part will just be like that, and this one will be like this. Now let's not Control J for these. Let's do 7, G, put it right there, GZ, touching the floor, GY, scale it down, scale it in the X-axis, GX, make sure it's there, and let's just copy Control L, Shift D, 7, scale it in the Y-axis, scale it up, Shift D, scale this in the X-axis, and just put them like GZ, edit, Control L, GZ, and put them like right there. Deselect everything, select this, GZ to move it up, and put it like right there. Perfect. One last little object is this, but we're just going to do Shift D on this, scale it in the Z axis, and done. Scale it in the X axis, scale it down, 7, like right there. Scale it in the Z, GY, right there. 7, perfect. GZ, and make sure it's touching. Edit, face selection, select these, GZ, and there. And the last thing we have to add is this little lantern right here, and we're pretty much done. So let's do Shift A, Mesh, or actually we can just reuse a few of the assets. The first thing I'm going to reuse, or actually no, we don't need to reuse. Let's do Shift A, Mesh, scale this down, about there, scale it in the Z axis, scale it down, Shift D, Z, scale this one up a little bit, rotate it in the Z axis to be at an angle, there, Shift D, Z, scale it up, scale it in the Z axis, GZ, right there, rotate it in the Z, be at this angle, and then just Shift D, Z, up here. Let's grab these crystals, Shift D, scale them up, 7, put them right there, scale them in the Z axis, rotate them in the Z axis, that way they're not the same. Perfect. Scale this down, scale it, do Shift D, and put this up here. Y, and done. Let me just actually select these, Control J, so they're all the same object. GX, GY, make sure it's centered, select both, scale it down, 7G, put it like right about here, scale it up, and for the main part, edit, Control L, Shift D, P, select. Scale it in the Z axis, GZ, make sure you go to Object, set Origin, Geometry, scale it in the Z axis, and then we're just going to make this glass. Perfect. And there we go, we have that little lantern. And I think we're practically done. We don't really need to add anything else. If anything, I guess we should add a few of these things right here. There's like a little potion. Let's just do Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder, scale that down, edit. Let's do Control R, add a loop here, add a loop here. Scale this in the Z axis to be pretty tall. Edit, face selection, select these faces, scale them down. Actually, select these faces, scale that down. GZ, face selection, select this, GZ, move it up, extrude, extrude again. Edge selection, select this, scale it up. Face selection, extrude, or rather right click, extrude along normals. Edge selection, select these, Control B to bevel. Add a few lines like that. Right click, shade smooth. Fix the normals. And there we go, we got a bottle. We can do Shift D on this book. 1, rotate it to not be at an angle anymore. Scale it in the X-axis to be pretty thick. Rotate it in the Z-axis 90. Rotate it in the X-axis 90. There we go. As for this one, let's do Shift D, scale it in. Let's do Edit, R, a little bit here. Let's do Face Selection, X-ray 1. Select all this, Shift D, scale it in. Shift D, P, P, select, turn off X-ray, scale it in, like about there, scale it in the Z-axis, and that should be our liquid. And we can just hide this temporarily, edit, edge selection, select this, F, and do Alt H. We can hide this again. Let's just select both of these, Control J, scale it down, GY, GX, and GZ. Y, put it right about there. Grab the book, GX, GY, GZ, and just put them in place. GX, Shift D, Z. Perfect. And now we have two pairs of books there. You can rotate this in the Z at like an angle like that, and done. And I guess that's pretty much all the objects. We don't really need to add anything else. Shift A, mesh. Like just one last little detail. Scale this down, scale this in the Z axis. Edit, face selection, select this face, eye, extrude upwards. Let's add a bevel modifier to this. Let's do a 2 here. Apply it, right click, shade smooth, and scale it down. 7, G, G, Z, and just rotate it at freehand, and put it like right there. And we're just going to make that green. Shift D, that like this, scale it down. And since we only see the head, it'll look something like that from the top. J on these two, and done. It's time to add all the colors. So, first, let's select these little green ones. Alright, that's all for this 5th part. In the 6th part, we're going to start adding a lot of the colors, basically painting in every single object. Then we're going to add a few bits of the lighting. So we're going to light the entire scene to make it look good. And that should be everything for this 6th part.